All right, can I really spend 20 minutes talking about a football schedule release? I mean, the ACC's drug it out over 3 days, so maybe. But no, we're not going to spend the entire 20 minutes talking about the football schedule release, but we're going to talk about it a little bit. We're going to talk about something else that came out yesterday. The first wave of transfers that we got to talk to, the media got to talk to down in the South Side yesterday. Some interesting stuff came out of that. So we're going to talk football schedule, we're going to talk transfers, and anything else that might pop into my mind as we sit here for the next 20 minutes. It's the Thursday edition of the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, welcome to Thursday. Welcome to the Morning Pitt. Welcome to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Welcome to Panther-Lair.com. Welcome to Chris Peak. The website is Panther-Lair.com. I didn't know if there was anything more I could welcome you to, but the website's Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. You see the dash right there in the middle. Make sure you use that, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. to get all of the latest Pitt sports news, football, basketball, and recruiting. We have it all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans all day, every day. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And, of course, our YouTube channel right here. You've already found it, and we appreciate that, unless you're listening to the audio podcast, in which case I'd appreciate it more if you went and watched the video. Just play the video through your phone like it's a podcast. You can play it through your car or whatever, your Bluetooth. But anyway, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, is where we put all of our Pitt video content, these daily Morning Pitt videos, our weekly live stream like we did last night at 8 o'clock. Me and Jim Hammett get together for a little Pitt sports talk with you. And then our post-game shows. We did one after the Georgia Tech game on Tuesday night. We'll have one after the Miami game this Saturday. We'll have, it's fun. It's a back and forth, and that's what I enjoy about it. It's what I like about the live streams on Wednesday night, and it's what I like about the post-game shows, is that we can go back and forth. We have a little conversation. We interact and talk about whatever's going on. You know what I mean? In the case of a post-game show, we talk about the game, and I tell you what I think, and then you guys get in the chat section there, put your comments and your questions, and we have some back and forth, and I enjoy that. It's more fun than sitting there talking to myself the whole time. So make sure you tune in for that. If you're like, man, there's no way I'm going to remember that on Saturday, we'll have a solution for you. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications. If you do that, you'll get an alert sent to your phone. That way you'll never miss anything. It'll tell you, hey, Panther-Lair is about to go live. You better tune in now with all your comments and questions. I don't know if it says all of that, but it'll at least tell you that we're going live, and so you won't miss it. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Also like this video. We appreciate that very, very much. All right, schedule release day finally happened yesterday. Monday, they announced the first game of the season, everybody's week 1 game, which I'm pretty sure most teams already had announced, other than Florida State and Boston College, who faced each other. I don't think that game was announced for week 1 yet. Tuesday, they announced all the weeknight games, the Thursday night games and the Friday night games. Pitt got a Thursday night game against Syracuse on October 24th. A home game, marking like the 4th year in a row that Pitt has hosted a Thursday night game. I thought for sure that this year they would switch that up. I thought for sure that they would finally, after 3 years in a row, 2021, 22, and 23, they had Thursday night home games. I thought for sure that they would switch it up and send Pitt on the road for a Thursday night game in 2024, but they didn't do it. Last year was Boston College, right? 2022, I'm drawing a blank on who they hosted in 2022 on a Thursday night. Fortunately, I've got the website right in front of me, so I can, I should know this off the top of my head, but who did they host in 2022? West Virginia. That's why. I was trying to think of the usual suspects like North Carolina or Virginia or somebody like that, but it was West Virginia. That's who they hosted, of course, in 2022. And the upside of that is that they hosted them in week 1. So they got the Thursday night game out of the way right off the bat and didn't have to worry about it. You know what I mean? Like, didn't have to worry about how the schedule would work out mid-season, how they would, if they would get an off week the week before, whatever it is. They didn't have to, they got it done and out of the way. They fulfilled their Thursday night game obligation right off the bat. And then, of course, in 2021, they had the game against North Carolina. North Carolina is a common Thursday night opponent. I think 2019, I think, was a Thursday night game as well. But if you go back over those last 3 years, 2021, 22, 23, they didn't host a Thursday night game in 2020. The original schedule, if you recall, that was released in January of 2020, had Pitt hosting Virginia Tech on a Friday night, which would have been the first time that Pitt hosted a Friday night game. I think they had always avoided that. Even going back to the Big East days, after weekday games, weeknight games became a regular thing, Pitt had always avoided the Friday night game, and then they were finally going to do it, but that was 2020 when everything got turned upside down, and in August they recreated the schedule and took that away. They ended up playing a Thursday night game eventually, the finale at Georgia Tech, but that was on the road. I would have to look back. I don't remember the last time Pitt played a road Thursday night game. They played at Virginia on a Friday night in 2018. That was really the game that sort of, that was the big boost to give them an opportunity to win the Coastal. So they went on the road that year for a weeknight game, for a Friday night game. They played at Miami on a Friday night in they hosted Miami on Friday in 2017, the season finale. As you might remember that game. That one was a notable one. But they think they had a Thursday. Yep, they had Carolina at home. Anyway, my point is it's been a long time since they've been on the road for a Thursday night game, and I thought this would finally be the year, but nope. They got Syracuse coming here to Acrisure Stadium. And so that was announced on Tuesday. Finally, yesterday, we got the remaining games on the schedule, which I think amounted to about 7 games, because we knew Pitt's September schedule. We knew they had Kent State as the opener, on the road at Cincinnati in Week 2, West Virginia at home in Week 3, and Youngstown State on September 21st. And then we found out about the Syracuse game on October 24th. Still 7 conference games left to announce, and that's what came out yesterday. And along with announcing the games, they also announced the off weeks. And it's sort of interesting how it worked out. Everybody gets 2 off weeks here. I think SMU actually has 3. They only have 11 games scheduled right now. And the schedule that the ACC released yesterday, SMU only has 11 games. I think they have an off week like the 14th or the 21st of September. I would assume they'll try to fill that because they have 2 additional off weeks beyond that. But where Pitt's off weeks fell, I think they got sort of fortunate. They play, as I say, Syracuse on the 24th. They are off the week before that. There's nothing worse. I think most coaches would tell you they hate this. Nothing worse than playing on a Saturday and having to turn around and get ready for a game the following Thursday. They really, really, really like having a week off before the Thursday night game, and Pitt and Syracuse both have a week off before that Thursday night game, so that's huge. But oddly enough, 3 weeks before that off week is another off week. So Pitt opens the season. They play those first 4 games in September, the non-conference schedule. They get the non-conference schedule done, and then they're off on September 28th before they dive into 8 ACC games. So they're off on September 28th, and then they go to Carolina the following Saturday, October 5th, and they host Cal on October 12th, and then they're off again before they play Syracuse on that Thursday night, the 24th. So between that YSU game, the Youngstown State game on September 21st, and the Syracuse game on October 24th, it's 32 days, and Pitt only plays 2 games in that 32-game stretch. That's a 32-day stretch. That's a bit odd. That's a lot of downtime. And it's going to feel like, games aren't even happening. And then they'll hit the stretch run. Obviously, they play Syracuse on the 24th. They won't have a game that Saturday, the 26th. But then it's November 2nd, 19th, 16th, 23, and 30. 5 Saturdays in a row, and really 6 weeks in a row to close out the season. They do close the season on the road at Louisville and at Boston College, so senior night will be November 16th when Pitt hosts Clemson. And here's a fun fact. Since joining the ACC, Pitt has the same record against Clemson that they have against Boston College. Pitt is 2-2 against both of those teams. And they've won the most recent game against each of those 2 teams after losing 2 in a row. So the first time Pitt played Boston College in the ACC, they won. That was 2014. The first time they played Clemson in the ACC, they won. That was 2016, of course. They lost the next two to Boston College, 2019 and 20, before winning this past season. They lost the next two to, after winning in 2016 at Clemson, they lost the next two, the ACC championship game in 2018, and then that destruction in the COVID year, 2020, before winning in 2021. It's very odd to me that Pitt has the same conference record against Boston College and Clemson. I don't think you would expect that, but a lot of it sort of has benefited from when those games have played and when they've occurred. Pitt's got Syracuse, as we mentioned. That'll be another game in a row. I've lost count of how many it is. I know it goes back to 1955. If I had a DeLorean that was fitted with a flux capacitor, I would drive up to 88 miles per hour to send myself back to 1955 and cancel the Pitt Syracuse series. But it's the longest running series that we've got if you're following Pitt. So it is what it is. I'm a little disappointed. I mean, this is something we already knew. The schedule release we already knew who the opponents were going to be. It's a little disappointing to not have Virginia Tech. Pitt had played 11 years in a row against Virginia Tech dating back to 2012, which was the first time they faced each other since, I think, 2003 after Virginia Tech left the Big East. 2012, it was scheduled as a non-conference game, Virginia Tech as an ACC team, Pitt as a Big East team. A year later, Pitt would join the ACC and face the Hokies for the next 10 seasons as conference opponents. Give me Pitt Virginia Tech over Pitt Syracuse any day. I will take that series. I much more enjoy those games. I appreciate that series. I enjoy seeing Virginia Tech. I enjoy the games that have come out of Pitt Virginia Tech. Even though Pitt Syracuse games have been competitive, they're just not enjoyable. And it's not really from a win or loss perspective. I mean, since joining the ACC, I think Pitt has lost to Syracuse 3 times. I think they lost in 2013. I think it was 2012 or 2000. I think it might have been 2012. Paul Chryst lost to Syracuse once. Pat Narduzzi lost to Syracuse in 2017, and then lost, of course, this past year. But it's not even really about the aesthetic quality of the game. It's just not. There's no upside in watching Syracuse football. And I don't mean to be rude to the Orange, but I mean, what joy do you get from watching Syracuse? I like watching Virginia Tech. I do. Whether they're good or they're bad, I like watching those games. And I think they've generally produced pretty competitive games against Pitt since Narduzzi arrived. And even going back to Paul Chryst. I mean, Paul Chryst, beat Virginia Tech in 2012. Did it again in 2000. I want to say 14. Yeah, 2014. That was the year where they had an off week before and they revamped their offense and ran kind of a wildcat with Chad Wojtek a few times. So Paul Chryst was able to beat them. Pat Narduzzi has been competitive with Virginia Tech. I'm disappointed to see that series go. Obviously, reuniting with some teams they haven't seen in a long time. SMU, first regular season game against SMU since 1983. That game will be on the road on November 2nd. And then Cal, first time Pitt is facing Cal since 1966. That game will be at home on October 12th. I don't know if there was anything else really notable to stand out here. Senior night versus Clemson, like I mentioned, 7 out of these teams had a winning record in 2023. Only 4 of them won 9 games or more. So, teams change a lot from year to year, but you have Kent State who went 1-11, Cincinnati went 3-9, Virginia went 3-9. That's really the low end there. Syracuse and Cal were 6-7 each, but you can't really project strength of schedule based on how a team did last year because teams change so much. As you roll down this schedule, where's the tough stretch? Where's the interesting stretch? I mean, I think Clemson and Louisville. They come out of the bye with 6 games left to play. They have Syracuse at home on a Thursday night. They go to SMU. We'll see. SMU won 11-3 last year. We'll see if SMU is what kind of challenge they present. And then they get Virginia at home. But then those final 3 games, you have Clemson at home and then at Louisville and at Boston College. And, that is probably, as we sit here on January 25th, that looks like the toughest 2-game stretch is the Clemson-Louisville back-to-back. And I know Clemson, they've been down or they're slipping. We'll see. I'm not going to take that game for granted. That looks like the toughest 2-game stretch, but obviously when you're a team coming off a 3-9 record, you can't really say that any stretch doesn't look tough. Cincinnati, West Virginia looks tough. Carolina, Cal looks tough. Hell, Syracuse, SMU, right? But that's the schedule. We'll see. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about these teams and keep an eye on these teams as we move through the offseason. The other thing I wanted to talk about from yesterday is we got a chance to meet some of the transfers in person. I imagine this will happen over the next few weeks. We talked to 4 guys yesterday. I imagine the transfers will be rolled out a few each week, probably every Wednesday. And no, we didn't talk to Cade Bell. So you can stop asking because he's out on the road recruiting. And until the recruiting period ends, which is in like a week or two, we're not going to talk to him until then. Because he's going to be on the road. So we don't have to ask anymore. But we did get to talk yesterday to Nick James, David Ojebwe, Nate Matlack, and Lyndon Cooper. 3 defensive linemen and 1 offensive lineman. And the thing that stood out the most, talking to those guys, and maybe it was because we talked to the 3 D linemen first and then Lyndon Cooper, but it was just every one of those guys. Why'd you come to Pitt? Charlie Partridge. Why'd you come to Pitt? Charlie Partridge. Every one of them. Nick James, David Ojebwe, Nate Matlack. They came to be coached by Charlie Partridge. It was so much so that I was making jokes like this whole thing feels like a commercial for Charlie Partridge. It feels like they cut an NIL deal with the Charlie Partridge Foundation. You know, that this message was approved by the people for Charlie Partridge. The old PCP. Ugh. But it really was. I mean, these guys couldn't say enough. And it really struck me. You know, I've said for the longest time that getting guys to the NFL is not the recruiting pitch, or not as effective of a recruiting pitch as fans often think it is. Why would you want to go there? Why wouldn't you want to come here? Our team puts guys in the NFL. Look at our coaches. Look at all the guys they put in the NFL. How could you watch a draft and not want to go to this school? Guys coming out of high school, kids coming out of high school, all of them believe they're first-round picks. I mean, like, most of them. I think, my opinion, based on covering this for almost 20 years, I think very few of them really make that pick based on whether they think the coach can get them to the NFL, can make them into a pro prospect. They all believe they're already pro prospects. And I think they get to college and they find out that maybe they are, maybe they aren't, and maybe they should have paid a little more attention to development and who could help develop them. I think a lot of these guys believe they don't need a lot in the way of development. And it's not about being like, not that they're all like arrogant or full of themselves. It's they're kids, you know? But once you get to college, and you're in college for, Nate Matlack is a 5th-year senior. Nick James has been around for a couple of years. David Ojebwe spent 1 year in college before he went into the transfer portal. He was at Clemson. Once you get to college, and I think if you experience college football and experience the college football environment, I think you get a newfound appreciation for development. Things like atmosphere, like the game day atmosphere, attendance. I don't think attendance ranks nearly as I don't think it ranks nearly as high with transfers as it does with high school kids who go to a game and they're like, wow, this is awesome, 110,000 people. Not thinking about, a lot of other factors that go into it. I think transfers, and these guys talked about it yesterday, and I've talked with transfers about it for the past few years, that they have a different perspective on things and a different approach because they've been in college. And I think they have a different sense of what's important, what they really should be basing their decisions on, and they take a different approach to it. And I think, for James, Ojebwe, and Matlack, that different approach was, who's the guy who's going to help me get to the NFL? Nate Matlack was a guy who was playing in a 3-4 defense at Kansas State. You guys, we've all watched the Steelers enough to know. And I talked about this when he committed back in December. We've all watched the Steelers enough to know what a 3-4 defensive end does. And it's not rush the passer and get sacks and put up big stats. How many years did everybody beat their chest about Aaron Smith and how undervalued he was and how important he was and all this stuff? Meanwhile, the guys who were getting paid and the guys who were making plays were the outside linebackers. It was Jason Gilden. It was James Harrison. It was Lamar Woodley. It's now TJ Watt. It's those guys because they're the ones rushing the passer and making the plays. And if you're that defensive end in a 3-4, well, hopefully you can block two guys. So the rush guy, the edge rusher, can get in the backfield and make the plays and get all the glory and the money. And if you're a 3-4 defensive end coming out of, in college, you're really stuck because your tape is not going to show you doing a whole lot in terms of explosive plays or making an impact. And so Nate Matlack said, where can I go and play in a defense where the defensive ends get after the quarterback? A defense that attacks, that's aggressive, that plays fast with a great defensive line coach. And Pitt checked every one of those boxes. And it did it for David Ojebwe too. And Nick James is a defensive tackle, and Nick James, who by his own admission is not the biggest defensive tackle in the country, looked at the success of a guy like Kalijah Kancey and said, Kalijah Kancey's a first-round draft pick, playing really well for the Tampa Bay Bucs in his rookie year. I need to follow his path. Who got Kalijah Kancey to that level? That's the guy I need to go work with. And I think recruits say those things because they feel like those are the things you're supposed to emphasize when you talk about why you picked a school. I think transfers genuinely mean it. And that's not to say that all recruits don't mean it. It's to say that I think transfers genuinely mean it because I think they have a new appreciation for what's relevant and who can actually help them achieve their goals. And so, there were a bunch of things that those guys talked about yesterday, and we'll write about it. I have the videos up right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can check it out, and it's good. It's all good stuff. They're really impressive guys. But it all came back to Charlie Partridge and what they believe Partridge can do for them as players and in their growth and in their development. And that's huge. I think that's huge. We always talk about Charlie Partridge and what he does as a recruiter, but he's got a reputation as a defensive line coach. He's got a reputation, and he's got a track record, and it impressed those guys, and I think that'll continue. I think he'll keep impressing guys. All right, I think that does it for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you've had a great week so far. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Don't forget, if you're on the Panther-Lair.com message boards, post your question for the mailbag so we can answer that tomorrow. We'll answer as many as we can. It's in the thread right there on the Between Fifth and Forbes message board. So go there and post your question, and we'll answer as many as we can in the mailbag. In the meantime, like I say, like and subscribe. And have a great Thursday. It's almost the end of the week. You almost made it. Enjoy your Thursday. We'll talk to you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt mailbag right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.